Hi everyone, it's Kaylee here. This video is not replacing my next main video that's coming very, very soon, don't worry. I just wanted to give my thoughts on Critical Role Campaign 4 while they were still kind of fresh in my mind. Just a heads up, there's a chance that some of the shit I say in this video is completely incorrect, but I'm not going to go crawling through hundreds of hours of campaign footage just to double check that I'm right, so deal with it, I guess. These are just my feelings, okay? This is just how I feel, and feelings don't need to be correct. And I can tell you the primary feeling that I have from Campaign 4, after watching all of it up till this point, the biggest problem I have with it is that 95% of this campaign is literally just Brennan slowly revealing more information to the players. And you might think, well, there's hundreds of hours of this campaign. It can't just be mostly that. No, it is mostly that. No, it genuinely is mostly that because there's so much fucking information. There's too much. Okay? There's way too much information. There's too much to keep track of. There's too much going on. The story is too complicated. There's too many player characters. There's too many non-player characters. It's all just way too much. It's not that I have a problem with like overarching mystery campaigns. In fact, overarching mystery campaigns are actually my favorite kind of campaign. But there's too many technicalities and obfuscations and extremely specific details that the players would never have fucking figured out on their own. And they don't figure it out on their own. In fact, I don't think there's a single point in this entire campaign where the players actually figure something out on their own. Because Brennan doesn't just give them the puzzle pieces, he puts the puzzle together for them. All they have to do is roll above 20 and Brennan will just start piecing the puzzle together for them and making the connections for them and telling them what they think and what they deduce and how they put... You're not supposed to do that as a DM. You're supposed to give players the info. They're supposed to decide what it means. Listen, I'm not saying I've never said to a player, like, you get the sense that this yada yada yada, like, some things are hard to get across in an imaginary world. But generally, Brennan just solves every mystery for them. Eventually, after they've rolled high enough on information or arcana checks enough times in a row over the course of several episodes, he just eventually just tells them everything. If your story is so intricate and complicated and has so many layers and interconnecting pieces and technicalities and weird kind of vague concepts that are like far outside the D&D 5e system, if it's that complex, you have to step in and explain it to your players every single time, then it's too complicated, okay? It's too much. You got to dial things back a bit. It's kind of like, you know what it's like? It's like if you were doing a stand-up comedy special, but you had to explain every joke because the audience wasn't really getting it. And then, like, once you explain the joke, once the audience gets it, it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's kind of funny, yeah. You see how that doesn't work? That's why this campaign doesn't work, in my opinion. Speaking of going far outside the D&D system, Critical Role used to be a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors sitting around playing Dungeons & Dragons. That's not really what Campaign 4 is. Campaign 4 is a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors sitting around doing theatre improv and occasionally referencing some mechanics from 5e in order to influence outcomes. That's it. You know how people talk about the Matt Mercer effect and like people getting like a false expectation of what D&D is like because of Critical Role? I hope to God nobody looks at Campaign 4 and tries to replicate it. Like, no, please don't try and run a game with 27 players in it. Please don't try to do the thing they do in this game where everyone levels up at different times in the middle of a session and it causes issues because there are things that they're like, oh, I had that because I just leveled up in the middle. Don't level up in the middle of a session. That's a bad idea. It causes issues in this game where they've got all these resources and it's a production. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. It's very evident that the format of how the show works and how they kind of split off into these different parties and then re-merge at a set point. It's very clear that this influences the player characters to make decisions that they probably otherwise wouldn't. Like when we're off with the Seekers table and Taisha's all like gung-ho, like, I gotta find my son in the Shadow Realm. Which she would be, obviously, as his mother. That makes sense. It makes sense that she'd do anything to find her son in this moment. And then Brennan's just like, you feel like you won't be able to find him at the moment. You've done all you can for now. And she's just like, okay, I guess I can't find him at the moment. Back to Dalmacia. Like, yeah, no, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I don't buy you just abandon your fucking son. I feel like you keep doing everything to find your son in that moment. You wouldn't go off and do other stuff for the time being and come back to the son subplot fucking later. But she had to. for the sake of the show, because the show dictates that after this many episodes, we're going to go back to Dalmatia, because there's stuff that we need to do in Dalmatia. You see, this show feels the most scripted. It feels like there is a set path that the players kind of have to follow. It doesn't really feel like they have that much agency outside of specific points in the story where Brennan has planned for them to, do something that will diverge into story A or B or C or whatever. It feels unnatural. I understand why they have to do it for the sake of the show, but you can feel it. You can feel that it feels unnatural sometimes. You can feel that the characters kind of wish that there was other stuff they could be doing, but no, we've got to go back to Dalmatia because we're getting to the episode where we have to go back to Dalmatia. You get the idea. But yes, I understand this is something they have to do for the sake of the show, but this is also a problem entirely of their own making because they chose to make the show like that. Speaking of the Seeker's Arc, I didn't watch it. For the first time, I watched the first half of it, but I completely skipped the second half. I've never done that. I've watched every single episode of every single Critical Role campaign. I've watched almost every single piece of side content. I don't skip episodes. I skipped these episodes. I skipped the second half of the Seeker's Arc. It was so slow and boring, and there's none of the characters in this team provide any sort of levity whatsoever. Everyone's just locked in super serious mode the whole time. There's also this bit where they take the Speak with Dead spell, and they kind of say that, well, because you're in a space that's kind of in between the living and the dead, you get more than 5 questions. You can talk to them forever. And so they do talk to them forever. They talk to them for fucking ages. And it was Valis' spell, and she doesn't even fucking do anything. Because Taisha just takes over the whole conversation, so we don't even get to see Valis do something interesting for once. And yes, if you're wondering why I know what happened in these episodes despite not watching them, it's because I watched somebody else's summary video on it. Sue me. On the topic of Valis and the other player characters, I actually like pretty much all of them. I think they're all pretty decent characters. But I do feel like Valis, Cadigan, and Julien don't really get to do much of anything. Cadigan basically disappears every single time they're in Dalmatia. Valis is often just there, but just doesn't do or say anything. And then Julien, who is Matt's character, who I was actually probably the most interested in because I've never seen him properly play a player character in a full-on campaign before, every single time he tries to have a serious moment and Taisho is within a 5-mile radius, she goes out of her way to step on that moment, even when Julien is completely justified acting the way he's acting given what happened. The only time Julien gets to have a moment is when none of the other player characters are there. It's really weird, actually. There's also this really dumb scene early on where he sticks a blade out in self-defense, don't come any closer to me, and then Taisha just walks into it. She's like, I slowly walk into the blade. That was not believable. I didn't buy that for one moment. That's like a moment that might make sense at the end of a campaign. It doesn't make sense in episode 3. There's a guy that you barely fucking know, that you fucking hate. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't just walk into his blade. You'd be like, get the fuck out of my face, bitch. Or you'd maybe, I don't know, give him some space and just let him have a fucking breather, given what just fucking happened to him. Everybody seems weirdly dismissive of Julien every time he tries to express any sadness or anger over his current situation. It's really weird. So speaking of weird, unbelievable, out of place character choices, there's 2 others I'm going to talk about. So somebody dies. I'm not going to say who, but one of the player characters does in fact die. Now, I have a tremendous amount of respect for when a player makes a choice that isn't optimal but is interesting. This is neither of those. It's dumb. It's a really dumb death because they're in an environment that has been made explicitly clear to them, really, really explicitly clear. You are in an unbelievably dangerous place right now. And so they split the party, and then they split the party again. And this one character goes off by themselves to save some literally fucking NPCs that I guess we ran into earlier in the campaign that were frozen as statues. But it's they're statues. They're not going anywhere. Nothing bad's gonna happen. You can come back and rescue them another time when it makes sense. This was senseless. It was a senseless character death. I'm sorry, but if you're clearly not invested in your own character's story and survival, why the fuck should I be? On the topic of players dying, one of the players I'm pretty sure actually mechanically cannot die. I know I said no spoilers, but I do kind of need to a little bit spoil to talk about Taliesins' character Bolaire. So Bolaire is basically a mask that basically takes control over whatever vessel happens to be unfortunate enough to put him on. And what we have seen so far is several instances of him actually intentionally killing himself to either get out of the situation or swap to a different vessel. this is a very cool character concept, but how exactly are you supposed to die? Like, how would that, if you're in combat with someone, unless they specifically knew that his weakness was the mask and like targeted the mask to destroy it, then they're probably just going to go for the neck or the vitals or something, which means the mask's going to be perfectly fine, which means that Belair would just be able to come back every time, wouldn't he? Plus, I'm pretty sure they could just chuck Belair on, like, the BBEG of the campaign, and if they rolled a low enough will save, he'd just take them over completely. Forever. So if you combine that with the whole, like, not being able to really die thing, what Taliesin appears to have done here is created the most overpowered D&D character in the history of time. And you know what? Maybe everyone's fine with that. Maybe all the player characters are just like, you know what? We think the story of the mask and how it works is really, really interesting. We don't really care if he kind of can't die. But again, this is very much going back to what I said about the whole, this is theatre improv, this is no longer a D&D game. Oh, whoops, I just realized I forgot about the other kind of non-believable character moment I was going to bring up. Azune has this moment where everything kind of breaks and he basically descends into a fucking mess, like crying and screaming and having a panic attack and being like, you know, acting his little heart out for sure. And I don't really think it necessarily fit that well this early into the campaign, but I was like, yeah, all right, you know, it's okay, it's fine, you know. This is the sort of character he's trying to play, like someone who's very kind of strong and kind of stoic on the outside, but inside they're like fucking suffering, right? So I think that was fine. But then he did the exact same fucking thing again, like a couple episodes later, for like a really like dumb reason. Like it's like, oh my god, I have to lie to an enemy. I can't take it anymore. It was cringe. It was a cringe moment. It felt unnecessary, it felt unearned, and it was just like this ridiculously intense moment of overacting over an absolute nothing burger of a situation. I'm sorry, you only get one like over the top emotional breakdown per 50 episodes, okay? You can't just whip that out every third episode and expect me to not to start kind of cringing and being like, oh, come on, really? We're doing this again? It's a bit much. It's a little bit much. Now, it's not like I don't have any good things to say about this campaign. I do. For one, I actually really like how fucking brutal and dangerous Brennan's combat is. I do kind of prefer my D&D combats to be on the deadlier side. It's just more interesting to me when player death is a possibility, even if it's a pretty small possibility. And I also like how he's like, I'm not going to save you from potentially winding up in an encounter with someone whose level is so much higher than you that their level is just a skull icon, and if you try to engage with them directly, you will fucking die. I like that. I like the idea of kind of like going into like a higher level area of a video game that you're way under leveled for and having to like sneak past everything because you can't fight anyone, but you just still want to do stuff in the area. You know what I mean? It's cool. I like it. And I will say, Brennan is the master of oh shit moments where something happens so quickly and so like brutally right in front of you with absolutely no warning or build up, which actually makes it like so much more unsettling. He is extremely good at making a threatening NPC feel threatening. He has that energy he can bring to those characters to make them legitimately scary. And like the whole calamity thing that he did, like the first time he ran something for Critical Role, those 4 episodes were outstandingly good. Some of the best D&D I've ever seen. However, I gotta be honest, I did start to notice in some of the subsequent things that he ran for Critical Role that he had a really bad habit, especially with information-related roles. He had a really bad habit of just finding an excuse for them to succeed anyway. And because of how information heavy and important information is in this campaign, and the players have so many chances to make more rolls and get more information, even when they're not even really doing anything that interesting to earn the information, they're just kind of cumulatively making more and more rolls over the course of several episodes, and they just, you know, I already went over it before. You get the picture. Specifically, the paint stands out in my head. Like, I lost count of how many checks were made on the paint. And the answer Brennan kind of eventually gave them was like, the paint's going to be related to an important thing that happens in a really important episode in the future. Because there was a bit of a disconnect where it felt like the characters realistically would probably want nothing to fucking do with this paint or with whatever was supposed to go down at the theater. I think at one point one of the players actually kind of says like, we could just not do the whole theater thing. but everybody knew, like, oh, but Brennan's got something planned for the theatre thing, so we have to do something for the theatre thing. We can't just not engage with what is clearly going to be a pretty big moment that Brennan has put a lot of planning into. And then we finally do get the reveal of like the theatre performance and what the paint was for, and we get this whole reveal, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's no chance in any of the circles of hell that the players would have ever figured fucking half of that out, no matter how much information you gave them, because it was so weird and esoteric and specific. Like, I still don't quite entirely understand. There was like this whole thing with like Valus going, there was like a forest, there was a dragon. I don't, this was a very confusing episode to watch. Okay, there was like, I didn't know where people were. I didn't know if there was some like weird, like, is Valus going into another plane for a bit? Is she coming back? Where is Azune? Where are the fuck are the Halavar people seeing this? Whatever Valus is up to? What is it was really hard to keep track of everything that was going on in that theater. I got to be honest. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I was fucking lost. So they knew they were going to be taking a break, and so I guess they tried to set up what they're going to do next in the campaign. But the setup was basically just like, hey, that thing that we just did, we're just going to do the same thing again and again and again and again and again. Like, okay, what are we playing, a Paper Mario game? That really doesn't sound particularly all that interesting to me. I'm sorry, but if all we're doing is just the same thing we just did, but we're just going around and doing it in different locations repeatedly, like I I think I'm done. Okay, I gotta be honest. I think I'm done. That does not sound remotely interesting to me. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Critical Role Campaign 4. Sorry if I sound like a bit of a negative Nancy, but I've just got to be honest. It's not working for me, and it doesn't really sound like they're going in a direction that is interesting. So I think I'm done. Regardless, I wish them all the best with Campaign 4. It has some good elements in it. It has some good characters in it. It has potential. And maybe it is going to be way more interesting than I'm giving it credit. Maybe Brennan's got some shit planned that we've got no fucking idea about, and it's actually going to be quite cool and interesting. But you tell your players too much, Brennan. You give them too much. And even though you explain things for them, even though you give them too much information, they still look like a bunch of deers in headlights half the time who have no idea what the fuck is going on. So yeah, anyway, that's how I feel about it. That's all for me in this video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.